Lectures on the governing principles of ancient China. The benefits of the virtue of humility. In the Book of Changes, Zhou Yi compiled in the governing principles of ancient China, it is said, "The laws of heaven take from the arrogant and benefit the humble. The laws of earth bring flowing water from areas that are full to those that are lower as it passes by. And the laws of spirits bring harm to those who are arrogant and good fortune to those who are modest. Even the laws of people despise those who are arrogant and prefer those who are modest. Being modest makes the morality of noble persons as bright as if with light, their virtuous accomplishment unsurpassable even if at low position, and should be maintained by noble persons to the end of the life." The ancient Chinese people learned from the natural phenomena of the sun and the earth, and reasoned the benefit of the virtue of humility. By being humble, one can gain wide support and trust in society, and understand the importance of self-improvement. These benefits all come from the virtue of humility. Professor Yuli Liu from the Department of Philosophy at the Party School of Central Committee of CPC is going to bring us her interpretation of the governing principles of ancient China and introduce us to the way to cultivate the virtue of humility. Here are lectures on the governing principles of ancient China, the benefits of the virtue of humility. Professor Yuli Liu graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy from Renmin University of China. She is currently a professor at the Department of Philosophy at the Party School of Central Committee of CPC and a mentor for doctoral students majoring in ethics. She is also a visiting professor at Tsinghua College, Sun Yat-sen University. Professor Yuli Liu has published many academic papers, received a PhD from the University of Hull, UK, and is a postdoctoral scholar at the National University of Singapore. She has been invited to give lectures and participate in workshop seminars in the UK, Italy, the USA, Canada, Australia, Japan, Singapore and Indonesia. In 2015, 2016 and 2017, she was invited to UNESCO headquarters in Paris to give talks based on the governing principles of ancient China. The central theme of her talks was the importance of the sage's education. In other words, learning from the wisdom of the past and also how to promote moral education. She has contributed greatly towards the dissemination of Oriental culture in the Western world. This video was edited by the Governing Principles of Ancient China translation team of the Pure Land Learning College Association and is based on the lectures by Professor Yuli Liu.
Dear friends, greetings to you all. Today I am going to talk about the benefits of the virtue of humility. A lot of people today are interested in studying the Book of Changes, Zhou Yi. Why? Because they believe the teachings in the Book of Changes can guide them to have a successful career, gain good fortune, and avoid disasters. How can these goals be achieved? In the Book of Changes, collected in the Governing Principles of Ancient China, we find a paragraph that says, "The laws of heaven take from the arrogant and benefit the humble. The laws of earth bring flowing water from areas that are full to those that are lower as it passes by. And the laws of spirits bring harm to those who are arrogant and good fortune to those who are modest. Even the laws of people despise those who are arrogant and prefer those who are modest." Being modest makes the morality of noble persons as bright as if with light, their virtuous accomplishment unsurpassable even if at low position, and should be maintained by noble persons to the end of their life. Sounds really good, doesn't it? Now let's look at these lines one by one. Firstly, the laws of heaven take from the arrogant and benefit the humble. The laws of heaven mean the law of nature. Through observing nature, we can summarise its laws. For example, after a full moon appears in the middle of each lunar month, it starts to wane night by night. What does this phenomenon tell us? Those that have reached the peak will be disadvantaged, and those that have not will be approaching the peak. From a deep perspective, this implies that we should stay humble and modest, and should know the importance of giving rather than of gaining. From such observations, we understand that the laws of heaven actually are quite simple. Excess will be taken away and deficiency will be compensated. This law was summarised by the ancient and put in the Book of Changes. This is similar to what Lao Tzu said. Tao of heaven is diminishing the superabundance and supplementing where there is deficiency. He further said, I have 3 treasures. The first is called mercy, the second is frugality, and the third is shrinking from taking precedence over others. From this we can see being humble and compassionate are Lao Tzu's principles for living. Such principles had been summarised through the observation of nature. With an understanding of the laws of heaven, let's consider the second line. The laws of earth bring flowing water from areas that are full to those that are lower as it passes by. The law of the earth is to change those that are full and to fill those who are modest and humble. For example, water will always flow to the lowest place on the ground. Seeing this, Lao Tzu commented, the highest excellence is like that of water. The excellence of water appears in its benefiting all things and in its occupying, without striving, to the contrary, the low place which all men dislike. We all know water brings benefit to all things, but doesn't demand anything in return. Furthermore, water is very humble. Unlike a lot of people who seek high status, it likes to stay at low locations where most people do not want to be. Therefore, Lao Tzu concluded, water's property is close to the Tao. In other words, the Tao is always at low positions. Only when one becomes humble and modest can one be close to the Tao and be in accordance with the illustrious virtue mentioned in the Great Learning. From the property of water, we learn that we should be humble and modest and not compete with everything in the world. Now let's consider the next line. The laws of spirits bring harm to those who are arrogant and good fortune to those who are modest. Ghosts and spirits usually bring harm to those full of pride and conceit. They bring good fortune to those who are humble and modest. The next line is the most important one. The laws of people despise those who are arrogant and prefer those who are modest. This can be easily understood as people like those who are humble and modest and don't like those who are arrogant. It is more so for leaders or superiors in organisations, as they want to bring success to their organisation, so they need to find talented people. How can the leaders achieve this? By becoming humble and modest, and by treating those subordinates to them with great courtesy. In Wenzi, which was compiled in the governing principles of ancient China, we can learn that a man's success comes from modesty and failure comes from being arrogant. It is said, the one who has risen to become a ruler is no doubt a winner. A winner who can defeat his rivals is no doubt a powerful figure. To be able to become powerful, no doubt one has to know how to utilise the strength of others. To be able to use the strength of others, no doubt one has to win over their hearts. And to do so, one must be a person who can act according to the principles of virtue. In the end, a virtuous person is without doubt a soft and humble one. What is meant by act according to the principles of virtue? It is the equivalent to illustrate illustrious virtue, as described in the Great Learning. Humility is the manifestation of such virtue and is innate in all of us. Should one act with arrogance, he or she will have hindered their illustrious virtue. Therefore, a virtuous person is, without doubt, a soft and humble one. A virtuous person must regard being soft and humble as the most fundamental virtue cultivation. We should understand that being soft does not mean being weak. Being soft means being tolerant of all things without violence. Such a quality will bring great results that are the soft defeating the firm and strong. Just like water can look soft and humble, yet in dripping it can create a hole in firm and strong stones naturally. Also in Wenzi we find that it is easy for a person born to a privileged family to acquire an air of arrogance, and a person born to a rich family to acquire a taste for extravagance. If the privileged and the rich do not follow the right way to guard against arrogance and extravagance, they will often commit wrongdoings. This is reminding us of a saying, if one doesn't study sages' teachings, one will not know the Tao and righteousness. Therefore, studying classics and learning from sages and saints is very important for people's continued development. Let's return to the Book of Changes. It is said, being modest makes the morality of noble persons as bright as if with light, their virtuous accomplishment unsurpassable even if at low position, and should be maintained by noble persons to the end of their life. When dignitaries, despite their high position, are able to remain modest and humble, the brightness of their virtue will naturally shine and thus influence those around them, even from afar. It makes their virtuous accomplishment unsurpassable even if they are at a low position, means that if those of a low rank are humble, they will be unsurpassable. Why? Because their virtue of humility will be respected by people and transform them. The best example is Confucius. Lacking a high position, money and power, he is regarded as the crownless king. Why? Because his virtue not only influenced the people of his time, like his 3,000 students and 72 prominent disciples, but also people of subsequent generations, both in China and overseas. Around the world, we can see numerous Confucius institutes. This tells us that, despite the fact that Confucius was not in a high position, he was unsurpassable due to his virtue and knowledge. This is called the power of virtue. The last part of the quote is, humility should be maintained by noble persons to the end of their life. If noble people, despite their positions, wealth and knowledge, can always maintain modesty and humility throughout their lives will be auspicious from the beginning to the end. Thus, being modest and humble can indeed bring everyone auspiciousness and success.
Professor Liu is of the opinion that through the study of the Book of Changes, we can be inspired by the laws of heaven, of earth, of spirit, and of man, and then understand the importance of being humble and modest. Chinese people believe in the philosophical thought of the unity of heaven and man. Not only does the Book of Changes embrace this concept, it also teaches people how to behave in accordance with it. Being modest and humble accords with the Tao of heaven, the Tao of earth, and the Tao of man, which also is a good way to accumulate wholesome deeds. What benefits could it bring by being modest and humble? Let us continue with the lectures of the governing principles of ancient China, The benefits of the virtue of humility.
In the Book of History, compiled in the Governing Principles of Ancient China, it says, "It is virtue which moves heaven. There is no distance to which it does not reach. Pride brings loss and humility earns benefits. This is the Tao of heaven." When people have virtue, heaven can be moved. No matter how far away people are, they can be moved and come to follow such virtuous persons. Therefore, pride brings loss and humility earns benefits. This is the Tao of heaven. Many examples proving this statement can be found in history. In Shuo Yuan, compiled in the Governing Principles of Ancient China, the story of the Duke of Zhou is one example. The Duke of Zhou was the brother of King Wu of Zhou, the founder of the Zhou dynasty. In 1043 BCE, King Wu of Zhou died, and his son, King Chen, was too young to govern the nation. As a result, the Duke of Zhou had to act as regent for 7 years until King Chen reached adulthood. The Duke of Zhou was a virtuous person and regarded by Confucius as a sage. At that time, because of the Duke of Zhou's virtue, many people were moved and came to follow him. Although he held an extremely high position and was admired by people, the Duke of Zhou was very modest and humble. According to historical records, when he was the regent governing the nation, he regarded 10 ordinary persons as his teachers and treated them with the etiquette of teachers. When visiting them, he paid his respect with gifts. Also, he treated 12 people with the etiquette of friends. 49 ordinary people from poor households would have priority in visiting him. He also recommended 100 virtuous and capable people for the government. He instructed 1,000 students and made 10,000 people government officials. If the Duke of Zhou had been a proud and stingy person, few virtuous and capable people would have followed him. He would have only attracted greedy people who desired positions. Such people could not assist a ruler to lead the country to peace and prosperity. The Duke of Zhou, even with his extremely high status, was not proud and arrogant. He was humble and showed his respect to people. It was his virtue of humility to attract both virtuous and capable people to be in his service that laid the sound foundation of later prosperity in the Zhou dynasty. In the Book of History, there is another saying, "He who seeks the virtuous as his teachers will win the throne one day. He who assumes no one else is better than him will meet his downfall." When one regards the virtuous as one's teachers and conducts solemn ceremonies to show respect to them, one's deeds will be regarded as proper and gain respect because one has shown humility and modesty. Others would be willing to point out this person's mistakes and help the person improve and succeed. Inversely, he who assumes no one else is better than him will meet his downfall. Why? Because virtuous and capable people will dislike his arrogance and stay away from him. Without the support from such virtuous people, how could he not fail? It is one's arrogance that causes one's failure. This also echoes what we said earlier. Pride brings loss and humility earns benefits. Pride will deplete one's virtue and bring misfortune. We now understand that those who are humble will gain the support of others, while those who are arrogant will only incur disaster. If those in the second category are government officials, they will bring nothing but catastrophe upon the nation. In the next section, we will talk more about how arrogant people will bring about disasters.
It is said in the Book of Changes, "It is virtue which moves heaven. There is no distance to which it does not reach. Pride brings loss, and humility earns benefits. This is the Tao of heaven." Humility is a great virtue. Only those who possess great virtue can be humble and beneficial to themselves, to people, and to the country. Professor Liu shares with us the story of the Duke of Zhou in the Governing Principles of Ancient China to show the truth of humility earns benefits. The Duke of Zhou, at the request of King Wu of Zhou, loyally instructed the young prince. Although in an extremely high position as the regent of a nation, the Duke of Zhou was still humble that he could even treat ordinary people as his teacher and meet with people from all walks of life to seek their support on governing the country. It was his great virtue of humility that attracted many virtuous and capable, talented people to serve the country. The Duke of Zhou laid a sound foundation for the coming national prosperity and the longevity, 800 years, of the Zhou dynasty. After 7 years of regency, the young prince became an adult, and the Duke of Zhou volunteered to transfer his power back to the prince. His virtue of humility has been highly regarded by Confucius and many generations of people. Let us continue with lectures on the governing principles of ancient China, the benefits of the virtue of humility.
The first sentence in the Great Learning is, "The way of great learning is to illustrate illustrious virtue. Should people become arrogant, they will forsake their true nature. They will only incur a loss to themselves, not anyone else, because they will not be able to illustrate their illustrious virtue. Secondly, if people are arrogant, they will find themselves in opposition to others, making everyone around them feel uncomfortable. In dire circumstances, others might begin to retaliate. This will create obstacles for the career of the arrogant people. Therefore, such an arrogant attitude will lead to failures or difficulties and ultimately result in a great loss. The ancient Chinese have a saying, "An army that is arrogant is bound to lose." This is the summarised truth from history. One of the cases can be found in the historical book Guo Yu. In 627 BCE, the state of Qin wanted to launch a surprise attack against the state of Jing. When the Qin's army marched past the northern fortress that was being charged by the king of Zhou, Man, the grandson of King Xiang of Zhou, observed the army and said, "Qin's army is definitely going to lose." King Xiang was very surprised upon hearing this and asked how Man was able to make such a prediction merely by observing the army. Man explained that whenever anyone passed by the king of Zhou to show their respect, they had to stop and pay homage. However, the soldiers merely removed their helmets, not their armour. Those riding in chariots simply jumped off and then jumped on again after a few steps on the ground. They were simply performing the minimum of formalities. Since 300 chariots, which represented the majority of the army, behaved in this manner, it clearly showed that the whole army had no respect for the king of Zhou. Therefore, Man concluded that the army was very careless and arrogant. Carelessness would lead to less thorough consideration far ahead, less cautiousness and less preparation. Arrogance would lead to ignoring propriety and laxity in discipline. How could such an unprepared and lax army not lose in the dangerous war? Man, a well-learned scholar, familiar with the teachings of the saints and sages, was able to predict the outcome of the war by simply observing an army preparing to go to the battlefield. You might ask, what was the outcome of the war? Qin's surprise attack could not be carried out since the state of Zheng had been fully prepared for their assault. The Qin's army had to retreat. However, on the way, they were ambushed by the army of the state of Qin, who captured all three of the major generals of the Qin's army. This was the end of the arrogant army, which proved the sayings, "An army that is arrogant is bound to lose." and pride brings loss. After hearing this account, what should we do? We should reflect on ourselves seriously. Did we have arrogant behaviour or speech before? Did they bring us auspiciousness or misfortune? We should remind ourselves all the time, pride brings loss and humility brings benefits. The biggest benefit is that we can get advice from others. Next, let's move to another inspiring book, Liao Fan's 4 Lessons. The 4th lesson of the book is titled The Benefits of the Virtue of Humility and says, "Those who are humble always increase their opportunities to learn, and in this way their good deeds are boundless." In this chapter, the author, Yuan Liao Fan, told us a story. One year, Mr. Yuan and 9 friends from the village went to take the preliminary imperial examination. Among the 10, the youngest, Ding Jingyu, was extremely humble. Mr. Yuan told one of the friends that Jingyu would undoubtedly pass the examination. The friend asked how he could tell. Mr. Yuan replied, "Only those who are humble receive good fortune. My friend, look at the 10 of us. Is there anyone as honest, generous and uncompetitive as Jingyu? Do you see anyone who is as respectful, tolerant, careful and humble as Jingyu? Do you see anyone like him who, when insulted, does not talk back, or who, when slandered, does not argue? Any person who can achieve such humility will receive protection from the earth, heaven and spirits. There is no reason he will not become prosperous." Sure enough, when the test results came out, Ding Jingyu had passed. There are numerous stories like this in history, which all tell us one truth. Pride brings loss and humility earns benefits.
In the last section, we heard Professor Liu's elaborations on pride brings loss and humility earns benefits through the stories recorded in Huayu about how the Qing army's unsuccessful attempt to launch a surprise attack on the state of Jian ended in ambush and defeat by the state of Qing. Being proud and arrogant can not only bring misfortune onto oneself, but also onto one's team, army, and even the whole country. Arrogance and pride are like twin brothers, and they make each other worse. It is the lack of ability and virtue that these two behaviours make each other worse. On the other hand, being humble enables one's success. How does arrogance come about? How does pride come about? Once we understand the reasons, the question becomes, how can we eliminate such behaviours? Let us continue with the lectures of the governing principles of ancient China, the benefits of the virtue of humility.
We all know that when we are praised or complimented, we can easily become proud of ourselves. The Book of Changes says, "A noble person who has made great achievements but remains humble and modest will receive admiration and respect from the populace." Thus, remaining humble and modest is very important for victors because their pride will attract jealousy while their modesty will win deeper respect. In the latter part of the Qing dynasty, there was a very famous minister, Zhang Guofan. He was well versed with the sage's teaching and understood the importance of modesty. Unlike most people who sought completeness and perfection, he named his study room Seeking Imperfection. Why did he do that? At that time, his ability, power and position were close to perfection. He understood that if he was not cautious and modest, he would easily become the target of those who were jealous. Even the emperor might be concerned of his power. So in order to remain cautious and modest, he reminded himself by naming his study room Seeking Imperfection. When interacting with people and handling issues, he was able to give his superiors credit for his success and benefits were garnered by his subordinates. By so doing, both his superior and his subordinates wished him to be successful and would not be jealous of or hinder him. Ancient sages told us, give credit of success to the public, give position to the virtuous, give fame to the superior. These are the principles and broad-mindedness of a great person in dealing with worldly issues. Not only Mr. Zheng, but many sages in Chinese history also applied these great principles in their daily work. For example, we can find a very inspiring conversation in the records of the Grand Historian, which was compiled in the Governing Principles of Ancient China. The Duke of Zhou repeatedly told Bo Qin, his son, who was going to assume the position of the ruler in the state of Lu, on behalf of the Duke of Zhou, "I am the son of King Wen, younger brother of King Wu, uncle of King Cheng, the current king. To all the people, I hold a rather high position. However, when people came to see me unexpectedly and I was washing my hair, I stopped washing my hair and tied it up immediately to see them. I even did this 3 times for one washing. When people came during my mealtime, I spat out my food and stopped eating to go see them immediately. Sometimes I had to do this 3 times in one meal. I did not make them wait for me, as I did not want to lose any virtuous and capable persons. When you are in the state of Lu, you must act with great caution. Don't be arrogant because you are the acting ruler." From this, we understand that it was because of the Duke of Zhou's humility and great efforts in being courteous to people that he was able to gather so many both virtuous and capable people to help him serve the country well. We know that there were many ways the ancient Chinese used to measure one's virtue and predict one's future. Among the many qualities, humility is of great importance. If one's success made them lose modesty, become arrogant and look down on others, it could be predicted that such people's success would be short-lived and they would soon be on the path of decline. Lastly, let's have a look at what Confucius told his students. In the School Sayings of Confucius, compiled in the Governing Principles of Ancient China, there is a story. One day, Confucius took his students to visit the temple of Duke Huan of the state of Lu, where they saw a qi, a vessel to contain water. It was explained to them that the main characteristic of this vessel was that it would tilt according to the level of water in it. When it was empty, it would tilt to the side. When the water contained inside was at the mean level, the vessel would be upright. However, when the vessel was full, it would turn upside down. Sage kings of the past often used this vessel as a reminder and placed it next to the side of their throne. The seat was called the seat of Yu. Upon hearing this, Confucius sighed and said, "Among all the things in the world, what does not tilt to the side when it is full?" Zi Lu, his disciple, asked a very good question. "Master, may I ask if there is a way for it not to tilt and turn upside down when full?" Confucius replied, "Those who are smart and wise should maintain themselves by acting as if they are ignorant. Those who have great achievements should maintain themselves by giving credit to others. Those who are brave enough to conquer the world should maintain themselves by acting as if they are cowardly. Those who have great wealth should maintain themselves by acting with humility. This is what the ancients described as the way of great humility."
In the last section, Professor Yuli Liu quoted from the Book of Changes that a noble person who has made great achievements but remains humble and modest will receive admiration and respect from the populace. She also told us that the reason for these people to become arrogant and proud is that they considered themselves to have great achievements. Such people would look down on others and easily become the target of jealousy and scorn. This is why Professor Liu reminded us to be a noble person is to be modest despite our achievements, like the examples set by Zheng Guofan, who gave credit to his superior and benefits to his subordinates. Another example was the Duke of Zhou, who, with a great heart, did the same. He achieved great fame in the long history of China. Upon seeing the vessel qi, Confucius advised his students to be inspired by the seat of Yu, so that in order not to be turned upside down, they must appear as if slow-witted when they have attained great wisdom, and how that is the highest degree of humility.
Let's now look at important quotes compiled by Master Hong Yi. For matters, don't try and achieve complete victory. For things, don't try and achieve complete perfection. For a man, don't try to be in the state of full glory. These 3 sentences are a detailed elaboration of the law of nature that says, at the peak, things will develop in the opposite direction. We must all follow such guidelines. Ancient sages also told us, one who wants to take the lead at every step will be overtaken by others. One who wants to win each time will be crushed by others. Therefore, in order to have great success in our lives, we must be humble and respectful all the time. By so doing, we will be able to enjoy auspiciousness without calamities. This is the end of today's talk. Thank you very much.